My name is James Makoviak. I am the outreach coordinator for the project for Eden Prairie and Minnetonka. On the line, we have some of my colleagues from the project office. We've got Trevor Roy in our communications department, and David Davies, Nikongo Sigolo, also with the outreach team. And then I also see a couple residents who've chimed in. If you could just introduce yourself, we appreciate it. We've got AG and Carolyn. You'd like to?
My name is Carolyn, and I live in Eden Prairie, and so I'm obviously very interested in this topic.
Nice, thank you, Carolyn.
Mm-hmm.
AG? If not, that's fine too. All right, just to let everybody know, again, we're going to do a short presentation. Well, we've got quite a bit of information in the presentation. We've got a full hour, and we won't. If we have to go later, we'll go later. If more people join us, or if the conversation extends beyond the 6:30 mark, we're not going to hold that fast. Also, I'd like to let you know that this presentation will also be recorded. So in terms of comments, thoughts, we just want everybody to be aware of that as well. So what I'll do is make this a little bit more informal. You know, we've got 4 or 5 parts to the presentation, and I'll stop after each part, and I will ask folks if they have any questions. In that way, you know, as we move through it topically, we'll be able to address questions as they come up. All right, give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to here we go. Put up the presentation. Here we go. All right, before I start, does anybody have any preliminary questions or comments?
No, I don't.
All right, thanks. Now, okay, if you guys, Carolyn and AG, if you guys could just give me a moment here, I'm going to talk to my colleagues briefly. I'm having a little technical problem here, turning the pages, and I'm not quite sure why. And I'm wondering if you guys, before we move on, so I don't have to kind of endure what happened last night, if you could just kind of figure out why that's going on. I've got a PDF up, and I'm pressing, it sort of catches and goes and sometimes doesn't go. Any suggestions or thoughts there? No? All right, let's give it a go.
Are you saved on the laptop or on the drive?
I am. I saved it in my file, right?
Forward arrow would work, I guess. Try
What's that?
Forward arrow.
Yeah, I'm trying all the arrows. Okay, let's get going. Seems to get stuck a little bit, but we'll keep going. All right, again, thanks everybody for coming. Metro Green Line Extension Virtual Town Hall for the City of Eden Prairie. Today's topics, we're just going to do a brief project overview and update. We'll recap 2021 construction. We'll project into 2022. We'll discuss briefly what the systems contract work is, safety and security, and outreach and communications. So topic 1, the project overview. For those of you who have followed the project, you've probably seen this slide before. This is the 14.5-mile alignment, fairly large construction zone that will extend the current Green Line, which runs from St. Paul to Minneapolis. 16 stations, 14.5 miles. Once revenue operations begin, people will be able to travel from Southwest Station all the way to St. Paul if they like with one ticket. Go again. Oh, come on.
Can I ask a question? Is this
Sure.
meeting specifically about the construction itself or operations or both, or?
It can be whatever you want it to be, any questions you
Okay.
want, but the presentation is essentially going to cover construction and, you know, sort of the next phase of construction and systems. And then we'll talk initially about some of the recent announcements to the changes that were made to our project that we announced last fall.
Okay.
All right.
Because I think you probably have been asked about this at other town halls. I mean,
Yep.
you certainly have the construction piece of it, but there's also the concerns that people have after it's up and running about, homeless people and people urinating
Yes.
on the trains and all of that
Sure.
really icky stuff that comes along with it.
Yep. Yep. No, that's all.
Okay.
That's all fair game.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. I know that those are legitimate concerns people have. All right, so again, here's the scope of the project. Again, 44 new structures, right? 29 new bridges. That includes the light rail, pedestrian, roadway, freight bridges, as well as 7 existing bridges modifications like you see on I-494 there. We extended I-494 on Flying Cloud Drive to include the LRT. We added the LRT to the 494 bridge. 6 pedestrian tunnels, and then we have the 2 cut and cover tunnels, right? The big one in Kenilworth, that's over 2,000 feet, and then we have the one we've recently completed the restoration of 62 under 62. Put that back together. 15 at-grade crossings. In Eden Prairie, you'll see them like on Technology Drive off Flying Cloud, Viking Drive as well. 127 retaining walls. It's quite a large, vast, complex project. All right, project update. Now, some of you have heard that we had originally projected our revenue operations to begin in 2023, and that we felt very confident about that. But in the last 3 years of construction, we have encountered some additional scope increases or increases to the construction project. And one is a corridor protection wall. You can follow the line over, and basically that's like a mile-long concrete wall that separates the rail corridor from the LRT corridor as we head into Minneapolis. Dealing with the railroad is sometimes difficult. The railroad has a lot of power, and they've been around a long time. And they were very, gracious enough to negotiate with us. And one of the stipulations they had was putting up this corridor protection wall. Now, when we handed off the civil contract in 2018, the design for that wall and the cost of that wall were not clear. We had projected a certain cost, but we had left the design to the railroad to satisfy their conditions. And then not too long ago, we had received, I think about a year and a half ago or so, we actually received that design. And of course, now we have to fit that into an existing contract that we've already put out to bid. So that was an addition to the bid, like a change order, a massive change order. And then, so we've had to compensate, the schedule and costs for that. And then in addition, those of you who follow the news have seen some of the challenges that we have in the Kenilworth corridor in building that tunnel. And while, it's not unusual, right, with very large projects, especially a tunnel, it's a fairly long tunnel in a very narrow corridor where we've had to make several methodological pivots, right, where we've encountered variables, encountered challenges once we began the digging, once we began the process of constructing that tunnel. And so one of the variables methodological variables that we've added here is a secant pile wall. One of the things I'd like to recommend to you, if you do visit our webpage, there's a lot of tremendous resources there. But if you go to it, our webpage, then there's a tab for project videos. And we've got several really useful, informative videos there, but one of them actually goes into some detail on the Kenilworth Tunnel and explains the construction process step by step. It's very informative, great visual images there as well. One of the things I just want to mention, I wanted to mention earlier was, you may notice too that we are not using the SWLRT acronym anymore, Southwest Light Rail Transit. We used that up until the beginning of this year, and we are now moving toward referring to our project by its rightful name. Of course, it's the Green Line Extension. So the GLE is what we're talking about. That's the terminology we'll be using here today, and you'll see us using our publications, our public communications, and the rest, because we're obviously extending the current Green Line. Okay, so these are two. I mentioned the corridor protection wall, secant wall, the methodological challenges in the Kenilworth corridor, We also have the Eden Prairie Town Center Station. That was also, like these other two, additions to the contract that was bid on in 2018. Now, you may ask, why is it the Town Center Station in addition? Well, it was originally part of the project, right, when we were in the design phase. But if you remember long ago in 2015, we had during the design phase, we were asked we made a projection. I don't know what we were at, 65 or 75% design, maybe more, but it became apparent that the price of the project was more than was originally estimated at that time. And so we were asked to cut a couple $100 million. And part of that reduction was the elimination of this town center station. However, your city staff, your city leaders decided it was very important to the city of Eden Prairie to have that station, and they took it upon themselves in order to raise the money through grants and other means in order to for us to put that back into the project. But of course, it wasn't a part of the original bid, and that's the main point here. These are scope increases that weren't a part of the original contract that had to be included and added now after the fact into the contract after construction has begun, therefore increasing the cost and increasing the schedule, of course, because we've got 14 and a half miles, very complicated, a lot of work to do, a variety of work, and we needed to sort of fit that in. Some of the items, when you're doing a project like this, you might be interested to know we've got some things like some larger projects like the tunnel are long lead items. They take a long time. They're called critical path. The things that need to get done first before other things can get done all along the corridor. So now that you have that already worked out, now that you have these scope increases, that obviously affects the schedule, affects how all those all those features and all those parts of the project in construction are completed. So it gets complicated fast, but we've been able to work that through over the last year. And now I'm going to play with my mouse again. Here we go. All right. So in summary, right, so in terms of these scope increases, you had the original construction schedule and cost, right? 2018, we put the bid out, it was accepted, we awarded it. Now we have a new civil construction agreement and some change orders. And then, of course, that equals a revised civil construction schedule and cost. All right. And then with the revised, let's see if I can get rid of this. All right. With the revised project schedule and cost, right? You taken together, we have these other contracts, right? Following the civil contract, I should mention too, there's 4 contracts. The first one was the rail cars. That one we've already seen Siemens deliver, I think 27 or 26 or 27 new rail cars that will be used on the Green Line extension. Then we got staffing, supplies, right? Overall project schedule and cost. So you have this revised civil construction from the last slide. Then, of course, we have the systems contract, which follows the civil. So you've got your rail cars, civil contract, and the systems, which is the electrification. And then following that, we've got the supporting contracts, the testing schedules, the ticket boxes, things like that need to be added. That will take some time as well. So once you change, like a domino effect, you change the civil contract, then of course that shifts the schedule and sometimes the cost, depending on how much time goes by, for the contracts that follow, like the systems and the contracts. So you're just giving you a broad overview, of some of the implications of some of these scope increases that were unanticipated, which then, of course, equals our revised project opening day and cost that we announced later last year. Okay, just again, same slide, some additional detail. Basically, with the revised civil construction schedule, we were adding an additional 34 months. And most of that, a good portion of that is to complete the Kenilworth Tunnel that has to be done, in a certain sequence. And so there's really, if we can speed it up, we will. But at this point, this is our projection. And what's also going to happen and what you're going to see, particularly here in Eden Prairie, is that most of the civil work will look like it's being completed. Of course, as civil work is completed in one of these 16 segments along, these work segments along our 14 and a half miles, as those are completed, we'll hand it off starting this year to the systems contractor. And you're going to start seeing the systems guys on the railway, on the alignment, and they're going to be hanging catenaries and electrical wires and putting in what we call traction power substations. We'll just kind of show you some photos of later. So that'll also be part of that. So once they're completed, right, it's going to look like a lot of it's done. And then once there's a certain period of time it takes to do the testing where, at some point the project will look completed. And then, of course, we've got 6 to 9 months, I believe, of fairly sophisticated testing procedures that have to go on in order to verify, guarantee the safety, and just that everything works together all the way from St. Paul. So revised project costs will be known once we understand what the revised system schedule cost is. Now, we have just completed or nearly completed the civil construction review based on the scope increases. Then we're going to go on to the systems, and then we're going to go on to the revised supporting contracts, the fourth contract, and then we will have that project opening day and cost, the final cost, we'll be able to identify. Now, the budget. As you know, Green Line Extension has undergone cost-cutting measures already. In 2015, I think we cut $215 million. But we're very confident we're building a well-constructed line that meets the needs of the community. And we're about 62%. When the slide was made, we're about 60%. But I think with 62% of the civil work done, meaningful reductions, right, as a way to save money are not really possible at this point, given what's been constructed. So we require additional funding. Again, once we figure out what that final number will be, we'll need additional funding to complete the project. And we'll continue to work with our partners, and we're confident in collaboration we'll identify those funding sources and be able to compensate for and pay for these additional features. All right, one of the things that we like to point out, of course, because it's an awful lot of money, right? We're talking billions of dollars. And but in order to really, I think, best understand the value of the project, whether it's like buying a car or buying a house, it's important to do a comparison of equal value, right? So, for example, with the light rail, there are been light rail projects going on and being built and are running all over the country for the last 30 years. And currently, I believe there are maybe up to 15 projects or more of one size or another, different levels of complexity that are very different from ours, except that they similar in the way in that there are a light rail project, but they're going on now and they're under construction in different phases, just like ours. But we have a couple of peer projects that we refer to in Seattle. I think they're building 4 additional lines now, Portland, Houston. But when you look at it, that first slide, that first yellow dot, before we announced these scope increases and all the complications and the schedule and the cost increases that follow, we were at about $152 million per mile. And now after those, we anticipate that price to go up to about 180 to about 190 million per mile. The peer projects are about 200 million to 500 million per mile. Now, here's a list of some of them, right? Pittsburgh, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, and these are just a portion of any number of them going on elsewhere in the country as well. They're different lengths, different numbers of stations, and the cost per mile is something to consider when you look at the complication, the construction, the complication of that project. We've got these 2 really large, complicated tunnels. Some of these projects don't have tunnels. Some of them are in urban areas that are more dense, more difficult to construct even than ours. So depending on the variables, depending on the conditions, that price goes up or down based on the level of difficulty. All right, but in addition to these scope increases and changes, we've already seen about $2 billion in permitted and planned community development. Early on, you saw the Elevate project, which was supposed to be constructed, fairly near to when we were finished. But as things turned out for a variety of reasons, they were done several years before. But there's a number of projects, similar development projects all over the corridor. There's, I think, 5 in Opus alone in Minnetonka. But you can see here, there's also projects in Beltline, St. Louis Park. You have Hopkins, obviously, Minnetonka Station and Opus. And then, of course, there's a picture of Elevate. Now, we also try to maintain a fairly high percentage of construction contracts that go to DBE or disadvantaged business enterprises. And throughout the civil contract, over 16% and you can see the dollar amount there and the percentage that we've achieved, which is fairly high and something we're proud of. It's something that we continue to work diligently toward. You can see in the systems contract and the contracts that follow, you'll see similar percentages. So overall, as far as the economic, value of construction goes, we've paid out over $53 million in revenue throughout the state in 65 of 87 counties so far as of July last year, and putting a lot of people to work in this area in the state of Minnesota, more than 1.8 million hours. You can see the number of paychecks going out, 75% of the counties, and we talked about the DBE and the number of construction and construction-related jobs, 7,500. All right, before we go on to just some of the overview of the construction work completed in Eden Prairie last year, do you have any specific questions that you'd like to discuss now? If not, I will carry on. Thank you. All right, here's a recap. Okay, I talked a little bit about the 4 contracts, right? The civil, the rail cars, civil systems, and the testing contracts. We also have several sequences that have to be achieved in order, right, as we build the line. Here you can see the utilities. A lot of what was going on in Eden Prairie when, we really had an impact on your driving, and we're very cognizant of that and appreciate your patience in the last couple of years. We're past that now, but a lot of that in the first year, in 2019 specifically, was utility work. In planning these projects, we worked very closely with our city partners, and Eden Prairie was one of them, obviously. And, to order to minimize work and sometimes even to save money by doing utility work that they're projected to do, maybe 10 years from when we first discussed it, weren't going to do it, but then we decided we were going to do it. We were going to be in that area. So rather than, double up, and rather than do things twice, tear things up twice, we incorporated a lot of that that planning, utility planning in each of the cities into our utility planning. And that was a big job. And in the next slide or two, you'll actually see the number of utilities, that were affected. There's a lot of utilities that we had to work through to be moved, altered, or enhanced. And then, of course, after that, you witnessed it in Eden Prairie, all the site prep, some buildings being torn down, and just a lot of work. And then, of course, you've been witnessing for 2 solid years the structure, track, and station work, Southwest Station, right? The Prairie Center Drive Bridge is very obvious, Valley View Bridge off of Flying Cloud Drive. And then you're going to see a lot more of the systems work. Systems work won't be anywhere near as onerous, disturbing, right, or even as visible as the civil work. Generally, they tend to stay within the corridor on the track. They have their own machines that run up and down the tracks that carry, their supplies, and they do most of their work relatively quietly compared to the construction work. And so you'll see a lot of that going on, hanging to the wires in the Canton areas if you have any visibility to the project. And then finally, of course, prior to revenue service, as I indicated, there'll be, a good amount of time that will go into the testing so that we have the safety and then the communications, right, and the operator training in order to get to revenue operating day.
Quick question.
Sure.
This might be a dumb question, but I don't think I remember seeing a second station in Eden Prairie. Is it over by the mall somewhere, or?
No, good question. Yeah. You know where Southwest Station is. It is, if you know where Redstone is.
Yes.
Okay, right west of Redstone. If you look down there, you'll see over the last maybe 8 or 9 months, the framework and most of the station has been completed, the town center
So they're
station.
really pretty close together then.
Yeah.
But what does getting off a train at Redstone do for me? I mean, there's a Champs and a few restaurants around there, but why would people want to have a station there?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, there are a number of apartment buildings too, right? The Cascade,
Oh, okay.
got the
All right.
Arrive running down there, and there's also going to be future development. I mean,
see.
I think at this point, we really don't know what's going to happen there at that property owned by Champs, right? But that's that's a really super property there. But to answer your question, when these alignments are decided, it's a very, in-depth and collaborative process between the county, the project office, and the cities. That's obviously the alignment's going through. We've got 5 cities, right? And 14 and a half miles. So how do you get from Target Field all the way down to the terminus at the end of the line in Southwest Station? and what path should it take? And we call that the locally preferred alternative, or the LPA. That process in Eden Prairie, I wasn't actually around for that. I've been with the project for 7 years, but that goes on well before design. That's something that's settled relatively early on. The county then is involved in that, and then once that's settled, they hand it off to the project office for the design phase. But obviously, when Eden Prairie wanted that town center station, because and living in Eden Prairie is always in search of a downtown, right? It doesn't naturally have one. So they rebranded it. They called it Town Center Station. Obviously, you may or may not know that what was Eden Road, when you come off of Flying Cloud Drive, right, then you head down toward Redstone, is now called Town Center Place. At some point this year, you could see the beginnings of the extension road that will run right west, will run down right behind Bolero in front of the station. There'll be some curbside parking and the rest there. And I think in future, the city would like to create a road from where we'll have a cul-de-sac down behind Bolero that will go directly, south to Singletree. So there's a lot of future planning associated with the location here. But I think in this case, with Town Center Place, they wanted something that would be, as close to their downtown area, that was some kind of accessibility, to the mall as well. And, we worked with Southwest Transit down to co-locate eventually down at Southwest Station with them. And, I know that in our conversations with them that, they're thinking, obviously planning in the future as well. And they're looking at, what their business model will be over the next 10 or 15 years with their small, the small ride shares that they have, with their vans, with the small Tesla fleet that they have now. And they've been, they've talked to us, in some detail about where we are going to locate those stations so that they can sort of help facilitate that last half-mile ride, right?
I see.
So there'll be, there's a lot of moving pieces here, but I think, to your question, primarily, Eden Prairie wanted to have that kind of presence in some kind of that town center place right in the heart, in the middle of Eden Prairie.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, as we said earlier, 2021, at the end of 2021, about 60% complete. You could see we had 25 bridges underway out of 29. This is throughout the corridor, 8 of the 8 tunnels, 114 to 131 retaining walls. You see a lot of evidence of that in Eden Prairie, right? All 5 bridges down there are well underway or nearly complete. So we've got 95% of all those private utilities, which was a big job, 75% of the 1,300 public utilities I mentioned earlier in that first phase. And then we had, of course, we completed the building demolitions at site prep. And now the systems contractor, as I indicated, is mobilized. Now, you may be wondering what Franklin Operation and Maintenance Facility is. Originally, when this project was designed, we actually had a full operation and maintenance facility plan to be put in Hopkins about halfway along the extension. But again, similar to the Town Center Place, and if you remember, actually, I didn't mention this, but the project alignment was supposed to originally go to Mitchell Road near City Center, but that was also axed during these cost-cutting measures in 2015. But that operational and maintenance facility was also taken out of the project as well, and it was supplemented with an enhanced OMF at the Franklin Center, which is where a lot of the maintenance currently takes place in Minneapolis. And then again, the 26 of the 27 light rail vehicles have been delivered. 11 of the 16 stations, here you can see that's the Shady Oak station there in downtown Hopkins. When complete, right, obviously, as I said earlier, there'll be a real fairly stress-free ride, and all the way from Eden Prairie to Minneapolis. And one thing I want to mention too, it was, I think, often goes unsaid, or not often said enough, is it's going to be a beautiful ride, right? If you look at the number of bridges just between here, even in Hopkins, and you look at where they go, you're elevated for most of this trip, and then under the tunnel in 62, you come out into Opus. You're going to be elevated for most of that and get views and see parts of that kind of drive corridor that you wouldn't have had before. I think people will be pleasantly surprised by that. All right, so in Eden Prairie, 2021, you can see some of the advances in Southwest Station. We've got the third level of the platform up. On the bottom left of that first photograph, you can see what will eventually be the new ticket center, the new indoor ticket center. And on the right, we've included that photo just again for those of you who remember the bad old days of all the piling, if you happen to live near it, the loud and disturbing piling, you can see just the amount of piles that go into securing, the foundation work so that we don't have any sinking or any problems in future. And you can see that little minefield there, a pile field rather, you can see how many there are near which will eventually be the bus loop, the new bus loop. And again, looking really from the same direction of the project, the photo on the top left, rather, you can see that ticket station all the way in the distance, rather. You can see the beginning of the bus loop here and the new exterior of the addition, 450 parking spaces. This is taken from the top of the parking ramp. You can see, Prairie Center Drive Bridge. Now, when we're leaving the station, elevate on your left. Shops will be on your right there. And of course, the water tower, we use that all for direction. This is again looking at the other direction, toward Elevate, toward Southwest Station, on the far end of Prairie Center Drive Bridge overlooking Prairie Center Drive. And at night, I don't know if you've been down there, but Eden Prairie added these lights, and they're very beautiful. They can change them any color they want, depending on the season or whatever event is going on. Here's your Eden Prairie Town Center station. And here we're looking east. So just past this station, right? Or on your right, I should say, is this Town Center place, right? And then if you continue down that road, right at that light, if you can see it in the distance, Redstone will be on your left. And that'll be Town Center Station. And behind the station, of course, is Rosemont Emerson. You can see there'll be some street parking there. This was some of the before and after of the heavy construction as we tore up Eden Road, or now Town Center Place. In the left-hand photo, you can probably tell there. Redstone, again, is a landmark, is on your about the middle of the screen on the right. And of course, we put that all back together and finished that up last year. Tracks are being already laid. We'll be putting up some more decorative fencing this year. And this is the Valley View Road. This one I like very much because I think it's one of two bridges where some of the piers were given an extra decorative element. You can see that's beautiful. It's got sort of the imagery, the motifs of Eden Prairie. That said, when you are on, Valley View Road, when you're coming into Flying Cloud Drive there. And moving further, we go, over Valley View Road, we head on 212 east, right? We get off at Shady Oak Bridge, and then we go down Flying Cloud Drive, West 70th Street. There you'll see a Golden Triangle Station. I don't know if you followed in the news, there's another new development project in Eden Prairie going on right behind or to the left here of Golden Triangle Station. There's a big piece of property that Liberty used to own and left undeveloped where there's, I think, North Stem development is going on. So they're going to put in a fairly large and complex development there. They just got the final approval, was announced just this week in Eden Prairie. And that, of course, Golden Triangle Station looking due north. When we leave that station, we end up on Prairie Center or Highway 212 Shady Oak Bridge. And these are some photos of it during construction. You can see 212 there on the left-hand photo. Highway 212, both directions. This is looking west. And then the picture on the right is looking really, if you're just south of Highway 62 there in the City West area, looking south. That's the other end of the bridge. All right, now we continue, up off of Shady Oak Bridge. We are on the grade level. And then we take a hard left and we go west along the south side of Highway 62. And we enter City West Station. This will be a fairly large plaza. There'll be a lot of parking here as well, associated with the Optum campus as well. And in the far distance, you can see the south end of the Highway 62 tunnel. This is what City West will look like when it's completed. And you can see some of the tunnel work here on that south side, the middle really, and then after. And if you drove on 62, you would have experienced some of the lane shifts over the last 2 years. We've got that all put back together in its original form. Now we had to build the tunnel one half at a time. And that's a picture you wouldn't get to see very often inside the tunnel as they were laying tracks late last year. All right, any questions about the construction in 2021?
I was reading in the Star Trib recently about those condo owners from that old flour mill or whatever it is, finding cracks and such in their
In
their
Sika, yeah, in
building.
Minneapolis.
Has that been resolved, or what's going on with that?
Do I have David still on the line here? Let's see. I got to expand my view here, see who's still on the line here.
Yeah,
Let me just introduce you, Dave. Dave is the outreach coordinator. He's a supervisor now of our outreach team, and he works right in the heart of Minneapolis. He's much more familiar with that with me, so I'll let him comment on that. Okay, Carol?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Dave.
well, yeah, thanks for your question. Right, this was in the end of January where cracks and separation were observed at the Cedar Isles condos. We are basically the information that we have today, or where we are today, our status is that the investigation is currently ongoing. Regarding those cracks, we brought in a consultant immediately who specializes in forensic structural engineering analysis. And so this consultant has been working to investigate. Certainly, they're taking all the data that we have from our monitoring instrumentation, our work activities that were being conducted, as well as just the conditions of the building itself. And so they've amassed a lot of that information and are working through kind of analysis to see what they can find regarding the cause, if possible, of those cracks and separation, and certainly what is going on with the Cedar Isles condos. There's certainly been a lot of questions about why that would happen, and we don't know yet what the cause is. That's kind of the take-home message at this time. But we certainly want to keep the community informed about this. At the same time, we want to respect the relationship between the project office, the project, and the Cedar Isles condos members. As if since they are condos, we're dealing with multiple property owners in this one development. So we are working through that. We meet weekly with the association representatives there to kind of continue this process of investigation and just figuring things out. I was out there yesterday, in fact, kind of with the consultant as they're even gathering further investigation. So there's probably more to come. It wouldn't surprise me if there's more, reported about this, but we will certainly be planning to share more information about it. And certainly we're trying to find a pathway forward to restarting construction as well in that area. So more to come there, probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks is what I would expect.
Thank you. It's just worrisome as a taxpayer to see the cost just ballooning for something that it's like, yeah, when people really are not even going to be going to the office as much anymore. And it's just kind of disheartening to see sometimes just how expensive this is.
Yep. And I'll be very frank with you, Carolyn. We were all just disheartened by that, right? We're tasked with building this project. We didn't make the decisions necessarily. We're big supporters of it, obviously, because we see the value of it, all things considered. But you're right? We were all disheartened by the fact that we weren't able to complete this in 2023, and also that it's going up as much as it has. So we do share those sentiments, but we will be as responsible as we can be, as we've continued to be, I think, if the truth be known, in being as diligent as possible in order to provide, this safe and I think ultimately very effective part of the regional transportation system. But we do hear you on that for sure. I appreciate
Yeah,
you
and I think that really comes across just in hearing you guys talk about this. I mean, obviously you're professionals and you're trying to do a really good job, and I realize things are out of your control. So yeah, it's actually kind of just good to hear all this.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Can you guys just give me 30 seconds? I've got a email or a text here from your senator, Steve. Please don't, I can't, Swazinski, I think, Senator Steve, and he's been trying to get in here to the alignment, and unfortunately, he's been unable to do that. So I just wanted to see if I could get him this link, cut and paste it real quick, and if you don't mind.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
do see him as a participant.
James,
We
I'm
did?
here.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah, I couldn't get in. Yeah, I'll talk to you offline about it.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Thank you, Senator. Sorry, I don't have my full screen on here because I'm trying to watch and observe what's going on with the PowerPoint. But thanks. Thanks for letting me know that, Carolyn. All right. 2022 construction highlights. Yeah, I'm back to my button issue again. All right. Eden Prairie. This is again looking forward. And here we just have a general map, high level map of some of the work you can anticipate. I think the takeaway here is that all that heavy disruption, the traffic disruptions, right, the road restorations, that's all been completed. There may be occasional lane closures, and there may be short-term road closures. We got one on West 70th Street. We've got a little bit of work to do still down near Southwest Station on the roads there, but nothing anywhere near the disruption. And we're all very grateful, right, to the city of Eden Prairie for enduring that. We know how disruptive that was. You know, we all encounter that ourselves, depending on where we live. So we appreciated that very much. But this, you'll see by this map, there isn't anything like that going on. You know, we mentioned here, for instance, you follow my arrow, traffic impacts are expected, you know, but periodic lane closures here, nothing terribly much going on. This is in this area down by Southwest Station. And then we've got some bridge construction to be completed, right? Most of that is part of the superstructure. It's vertical, it's on top. You're not going to really see a lot of that going on. Maybe some painting, punch lists as well, because, for instance, like with the Valley View Bridge here, that is pretty well underway here. And then you see this follow up here below the Golden Triangle Station sign here. You'll see that little red line. That'll be West 70th Street. Sometime in the spring, we'll close that for a couple weeks in order to do our grade crossing there. The track crosses from that corridor near Old Blue Stem to Golden Triangle Station. So we don't have as much work. Eden Prairie probably has more civil work that's been completed or will be completed by the end of this year. So we've gotten past the worst of the civil construction disturbance. All right, the highlights. Again, stations, you got Southwest Station, Town Center, Golden Triangle, and City West. The 4 stations in Eden Prairie are, as you saw through those photos, is well underway. And same thing is true for all the bridges, Prairie Center, the I-94 addition on Flying Cloud Drive and the bridge deck. We've got the Valley View Road Bridge, 9 Mile Creek Bridge, which runs Flying Cloud Drive just east of Highway 212 between Valley View Bridge and Shady Oak Road there. And then we've got the second largest bridge in the corridor, Highway 212 Shady Oak Bridge. We showed you some photos of that as well. We'll be working on top of that as well. There may be nighttime closures on Highway 212 once or twice. We like to do those like from 10 p.m. to like 6 a.m. before rush hour, just in order to preclude disrupting anything. But they'll be brief, probably overnight, just for safety reasons, as we have to work overhead. And then, of course, the track work. You see that already. For instance, it's most visible right there in front of Redstone at Town Center Place along Flying Cloud Drive. And we're going to continue, the northwest expansion of that track work this year. Traffic impacts this year, in summary, eastbound Highway 212 off-ramp to Prairie Center Drive. At some point, we're not sure if it'll be this year or what time this year. There is a slight possibility it could float to next year, but at some point we need to do some work on that approach panel, on that off-ramp in order to deal with some ground settling that occurred when we were building at Southwest Station. Then, of course, West 70th Street, I mentioned earlier, brief closure there. but doesn't really disrupt anybody from Flying Cloud Drive. If you work on, in Golden Triangle there, Shady Oak Road will be an access point. And of course, as we always have, we'll try to provide effective road detours in our maintenance of traffic plan for any kind of closure, short term or more longer term. And then two things that we need to do is we need to what we call mud jack or lift the tracks that are sitting in tubs in our grade crossings at Technology Drive off Flying Cloud and then Viking Drive off Flying Cloud. They need to go up about an inch. So it shouldn't take very long. We're in the process of planning to see what that looks like at another grade crossing in Opus. And once we get that technique down, and we should move pretty quickly. But you can see these are all relatively minor, and then there'll be periodic lane closures. You probably won't even notice. Nothing will be really disrupted terribly with the traffic flow. And then, as I mentioned, that third contract, the systems contract, they'll continue constructing foundations for what we call our TPSS or traction power substations. And those are essentially located about every mile to provide the energy, electricity that goes out to the catenaries and the wiring system that actually powers the train. And in terms of milestones this year, the Prairie Center Drive, Valley View, all those bridges should be substantially completed this year. And then also we anticipate the relocation of Southwest Transit back to what will be, the future co-location for ticketing office, indoor waiting area for Southwest Station and the LRT light rail. But there's quite a bit of work that has to get done. We'll, at some point, once we finish the paving, we finish the station. See this photograph where on the left-hand side here, that is where the new ticket station will be. Once that's all operational and the buses can go in and out of there, then we will tear down the temporary bus station we constructed 2 years ago. Now, very briefly, for those who want to know more about the systems work, we have another joint venture, two large electrical contractors, Aldridge and Parsons. It's project team management, about 25 people, craft workers, 40 to 50 subcontractors. You can see some of the interesting, very custom vehicles that they use to run along the tracks to do most of their work. Just west of Valley View Drive, you can't really see it. It's hidden. It's on the north side of Valley View Bridge. We're there off of Flying Cloud Drive. You see the foundation for one of those TPSS stations. And then here you can see what they'll look like. They're just like large containers. And inside you see quite a bit of sophisticated electrical equipment. All right, another thing we wanted to talk about, because I've heard this concern, often expressed in Eden Prairie. I know we've got obviously, a ways to go now with an extended revenue operating date, but safety and security obviously is important, something we take very seriously, and it's something that we're going to continue to develop in terms of our message, in terms of communicating to the residents of Eden Prairie that, this will be a safe, and to your point earlier, Carol, clean and reliable system of transportation. So I don't know if you're aware, but the Metropolitan Transit Police Department is made up of 141 sworn full-time police officers, 50 part-time, staff for 24 hours a day, and they work closely with law enforcement in local cities. Now, they're already doing that. The Green Line Extension Project and the Metro Transit Police Department has already begun the preliminary work, of working closely with your law enforcement, Eden Prairie, emergency services, to ensure that when revenue operation begins, it'll be a well-planned, safe, and secure, coordination. And then we'll conduct safety education outreach probably a year before revenue service begins. We'll get a lot more information out there, as we get closer to it, to just try to listen and hear what people's concerns are and find both proactive and reactive ways in order to address their security and safety concerns. And just a little overview here of the project office. These are some of the things that we've done in the design and incorporating into the contracts to ensure passenger, pedestrian, trail user safety. There's something called the CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, through it's a fairly widely used set of best practices that we've incorporated into our design. And then, of course, proper and sufficient safety lighting, cameras, there's emergency services. You can see these blue lights. in the phones that are there, safety lighting cameras, right? It'll be very well lit with a public address system, so on and so forth. And then accommodations for the MTPD members at the park to park at those stations. We've got a couple other things here, designated pedestrian parking, bike crossing at the grades as well to ensure safety. And then finally, communications and outreach. Got my colleague Nkongo here. He's at what we often do, and we're looking forward to doing again here, is sort of an in-person tabling of public events. We recently got an invitation at Arbor Day now, Eden Prairie starting to ramp up summer activities. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend that, but probably will be at the July 4th Star Lake event this year. But it's going to be nice to be back outside again, or even back indoors. We get a lot of requests from Eden Prairie residents and community organizations to make these kinds of presentations, as people are increasingly more interested in the project and seeing what stage we're at and how far we have to go. If you want to follow, this construction a bit more closely, if you don't know, we have something called the construction update that we send out generally every week, every Friday to anybody who subscribes by email. We've got over 1,600 subscribers already. If you go to our webpage at greenlineextension.org, or you can still go there with swlrt.org. You'll be able to see a link, and you put your email address on, and you will get that information. Now, that'll provide the best information every week about construction that's going on throughout the 5 cities. So if there's any detours, there'll be maps there. If there's any issues related to trails or any trail openings that we're able to release, that information will all be provided there. So you get a pretty good overview of construction for the upcoming week. We also have our hotline call. We've gotten hundreds of hotline calls of all sorts during the construction. And this past year, it's gone down a little bit to 31 calls as construction started to reduce down. And then, of course, I get hundreds more direct calls or non-hotline calls and emails from community members. And I just want to extend that invitation to you who are listening as well. Please, you see my email address here. Feel free to contact me for any reason at all. Any questions, any concerns, or any comments that you have, I'm more than happy to engage with you. We also have something called the Public Information Work Group. It's a committee we created before construction started with city-appointed business people, community members, to be a part of a regular. It's a little less regular during COVID, but the first year was a more regular committee meeting where they provide input to us based on our overview of what we're doing, input about maybe what we could do better, and maybe what they're hearing from the community. It's been a very valuable committee to be able to to get that point of view that we might otherwise not get directly. And then something we're really happy about, we had a lot of fun with last year, were our public walking tours. We had 3 in Eden Prairie, and we're going to do something similar. I think we'll probably try to get at least that many this year as well. They're really great because they'll be posted again on the Construction Information Work Group. I think your city also posts them as well on their link to our page. And people have been able to walk the Prairie Center Drive Bridge, go down into, the tunnel areas, just get really up close and personal with construction. Some of it's very fascinating. It's very complex. We have a subject matter expert that joins us. And it's just a lot of fun. People ask great questions. It's great to, to have that opportunity to meet people from the various cities and have those conversations and see what they think and why they're looking forward to or not looking forward to the LRT. Right? It's just it's all good, and we appreciate them taking the time to contact us. And finally, as I indicated, we'll be running some more of these construction tours this year. We'll always have these pop-up events, indoor, outdoor, at fairs, parks, or invited events. And then we'll continue with weekly, and you see bi-weekly construction updates. Over the winter, there's not a lot of construction going on, so that weekly construction update reduces down to just once a week, twice a month. So we'll be ramping that back up again soon to once a week. And here's our social media presence. Again, our website, greenlineextension.org, or again, if you can't remember that one, remember the swlrt.org. That still works too. and then our Twitter, Instagram handles. And that is the end. All right. If everybody's still awake, I appreciate your attention. And is there anybody who has any questions? Carolyn, I don't think we addressed directly your concerns stated earlier, but
Well, yeah, so you were talking about the safety aspect of it and, you know, the officers onboarding and all of that. I'm
yeah,
assuming that that exists today with the existing rail lines, yet we hear and read in the paper and from anecdotally that, you know, there are a lot of people, undesirable, homeless, you know, people who you may not feel safe around that, you know, are on the trains and that they're not clean and that people don't have to pay. And it's like, I think, you know, now that it feels like the train is inevitably coming to Eden Prairie, it's like, from what I read in here, I mean, that's what people are most worried about is bringing crime out to our suburb. And that's just a very scary thing.
yeah. No, that's I appreciate that question a lot. I mean, that's a real concern. And I think for I'm from New York, right? So I'm probably a terrible person to speak on some of these subjects because I have this natural rail bias, right? I'm just used to it. I'm used to being on and off of trains, commuting, so on and so forth when I was young. But I realize that for a lot of people, particularly as far out as Eden Prairie, the idea of a train coming out here, right, direct line from the urban areas is new. And we do see a lot of negative press. We get a lot of negative press on the Green Line. News media, let's face it, tends to highlight, the more sensational. But it's also true that we have millions of riders every year, and I have to say by far that some of uh, the the media coverage is probably more of an outlier than it is actually consistent with the everyday experience of these millions of people who ride the train back and forth to work. But I'll also say that, of course, those things do happen. And with that in mind, it is something that we don't like, right? It's something that we are going to continue to work hard to find equitable, fair ways, humane ways in order to deal with some of the conditions because the train is just, I think, for more or less, the train is just symptomatic of, a lot that's going on in our society around us. And, we may see that symptomatic example, that might occur on a train, but it isn't necessarily due to the train or because of the train or because of that mode of life. It is a public form of transportation, so you don't have, the same constraints as you would inside a vehicle. But it's something that we've heard and we will continue to work diligently on. Obviously we want people to ride this train. We want you to be comfortable and we want you to feel absolutely safe. And that's our goal. And we will continue to do everything we can, right? As this thing opens up and it's a new experience and coming farther out here to the suburbs. I mean, really, nobody knows what's entirely going to happen. I think it's going to provide a lot of opportunity, for people coming from both ways. I'll tell you a story. Recently, I got a phone call from a gentleman. He's 30 years old. He's a single dad, and he lived in a place called what did he call Cottage Grove or something? Not Cottage Grove. Something. It's north. You go past St. Paul and you go north, and as I said, I'm from New York. I don't even know the names of the cities there, but he was somewhere north there, and he had a job that he loved very much in Eden Prairie. He was a line cook. He was a chef, rather, like an associate chef or something, down at the Kona Grill, and he commuted all the way down there because he loved that job. And he called me up and he said, "Look, I've been doing this for a couple of years. I'm spending all this money just to get down there." He said, "Is there some way, that you can help me with my transport, my commute?" Now, obviously, even with our bus system, we're just coming back now due to some of the shifts that went on, necessarily during the COVID pandemic as things are starting to come back online. And to your point, Carol, right, we're waiting to see where it all falls out, where how it all is going to shake out in terms of people being remote and so on and so forth. But the bus service was reduced in some areas, and so we're getting all that back online. And But unfortunately, after he went through his commute, and I wasn't able to obviously give him any information or any help there, but I was just so impressed with his, this is the kind of guy, if you've ever talked to a young person and, when you hear their heart and you realize, hey, this is not a guy asking me for anything. This is just a guy asking me if just how to get there, right? How can I make it better? I just don't know how. And, I was really touched by this guy. And I didn't really do much for him. But for some reason, he called me a week later. I went online and, tried to help him with some services that might be available. Maybe other people might know more about the transportation options and cost or savings. I don't know. And anyway, for some reason, he called me up and he said, you got to come down to Kona Grill. He says, I've got something for you. And I'm just shocked. I said, oh, well, okay. So I walked in and they obviously knew I was coming. I don't know how they knew me. I've never met him before. They had a booth for me. He came out and he was just so grateful, right, to try to help him out. And as it turns out, in his case, he was able to he got a chef job at the St. Paul Hotel, so he's closer to home. But I think you have a lot of people like that who are looking for opportunities, right? And who are really going to benefit from, the opportunities, as well as, of course, the employers down here are going to benefit from having a larger employee pool. We all see the signs on the windows and the doors, right? It can't keep enough people in a certain sector of the job market. So I think people will be surprised. I think it's going to be a change. I don't think anybody quite knows what that'll look like. But I just want to emphasize that we definitely take seriously your concerns, Carolyn. We hear you. And, as I said, as far as the safety and security goes, as we get closer to that revenue operating day, we're going to provide, a lot more communication on that. And we're going to, listen, hear your input as well. We want this to work and we want this to be successful for everybody. And so far, I'm fairly confident that at the end of the day, it will be.
All right, thank you. And thank you so much for this session. I really learned a lot and I'm so very impressed by, by you guys, your demeanor and professionalism. And thank you so much.
I really appreciate it, Carolyn. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for attending. Does anybody else have
thanks for putting this together. Yeah, my name's Andrew. I'm a homeowner here in Eden Prairie, and I work in Eden Prairie as well. My office is actually within walking distance of that of the town center station, so I wasn't aware that they were actually planning to build that. That's kind of exciting as well. But yeah, no, I mean, I just happened to kind of stumble across this on the website yesterday or the day before because I was interested in sort of the progress update and saw that you were having this town hall. So thanks for putting this together. I wish more people knew about it because I found it fascinating and I didn't have any questions throughout it. It certainly answers all the questions that I may have had. But I think other people would benefit from it. So hopefully people, download the PDF and view the video on the website because this is fascinating stuff. And I think that there's a lot of people in the community that just be interested to see progress and ultimately when this thing was going to come. I mean, they've been working on it for several years. And so the delay to 2027, I think makes sense. We understand what's happening, but I was really curious as, when's this finally happening and when are we going to see the benefits? So this is good stuff.
Is it
Thank you for putting this together.
2027 or 2025?
Yeah, well, we've said 2027, Carolyn, from 2023. 2025 is when we anticipate the civil construction will be completed. Not in Eden Prairie. That will be completed, significantly completed. I don't think there'll be anything left by 2024 in Eden Prairie. In fact, most of the systems will be put up, those catenaries and the rest, they'll be working on that in 2022 here and then 2023. So you've got 2 years of systems work to follow. Most of that civil, about 95%, except for, punch lists and other things like that are completed here. So, but elsewhere in the corridor, and particularly, in a certain portion, the Kenilworth corridor there in Minneapolis, we're going to be working diligently to get that done. And hopefully we'll get that civil work done in 2025. But again, after that, we've got this period of 6 to 9 months of testing. So, nobody, I don't know if people believe me when I say this, but I think very few people are as motivated to get this thing done as we are, right? But we want to deliver it safely. We want to just make sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, right? So in terms of that date, a little more background, right? If people want to stay on, last year in January, we made an announcement because later, probably late in 2020, we realized that some of these scope increases I mentioned earlier were coming online and that it was going to lead to, some shifts in the schedule and of course, like the domino effect to the next schedule and the next schedule. And that all affects cost. And then, of course, we're in the middle of COVID. You've got everybody talks about the supply chain issues, the cost of things going up. We've got inflation going on now. So, we took a year after we made that announcement to really do a deep dive and do a pretty thorough review of all of these different systems, all these different schedules, all these contracts. And we've been working, negotiating it, like, for instance, just the first contract with the civil contractor for quite some time now, right? In terms of all of these implications, in order to come with a fair and equitable agreement in terms of how, with these changes, how are we going to get that done and all these variables that were beyond anyone's control. So we're putting the finishing touches on that, and then we'll move on to the systems negotiation, right? And so on and so forth. But it's been going on for quite a while. So when we said 2027, we're really, nobody knows what else we could encounter, but we're 62% of the way through, right? But who knows? It's like building a home, right? It's like constructing anything. It's not uncommon in the construction business, right, to encounter unanticipated variables and to have to shift and change, and we'll continue to do that. But we don't know. But 2027, is, we felt comfortable, all things considered, at the time we made that evaluation, that that's pretty fair. Now we're going to try and beat that, obviously, and you're going to see a lot of things going on. There may be, most of the systems work on the western side might already be up. In fact, I'll mention to you that one of the things we are going to do, we're going to try to do, we're planning on doing, if it works, is to truck out some of these rail cars once we get a significant portion of that western quadrant of the 14 and a half miles completed, maybe through Hopkins or maybe St. Louis Park. And then we'll start the testing process, as a strategy to try to save time on the back end. So you'll see cars probably running back and forth there. And again, trying to get ahead of, the little bit of the bottleneck in the civil side there with the tunnel. And then maybe on the other side, on the eastern side of that tunnel, I don't know how much I'm not as well versed with that, but how much civil work or how far the systems will be. But you can see we'll have civil work going on and trying to finish that up at the same time, trying to get ahead, get that systems work finished on the west side, probably starting on the east side, getting testing going, right? And just keep reducing down all the work that's remaining while doing a multivarious tasks at the same time to try to, to meet that date and hopefully beat that.
All right, thank you. Got to jump off now. Appreciate
All
it.
right, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
Andrew.
thank you.
Appreciate
Bye.
it. All right, well, I know we've gone past 10 minutes past. I don't want to be respectful of people's time. Sorry, I jabbered on a little long there. I hope it was okay. I don't know, we've got Senator Steve. I think he might have bounced. It looks like he did. Catch up with him again, but I've got, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name, Ayan and Andrew on the line left. If you guys have any questions, let me know. This will be the last call. If not, we'll call it a night. And again, anytime you want to reach out, want to contact me, if you'd like us, provide an event of some kind, pop up or otherwise, we'd be more than happy to do that. Is there a final round of questions or comments? Our team, anybody?
I do have one question.
Sure.
Like, how would I figure out which station is closest to me?
Okay. I'll tell you what. Have you been on our webpage?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
looking at it and I was having a little trouble figuring it out from
Yep.
just the maps.
Yep. Well, if you go to the tab that says project coordinators, you will immediately, I think, see, or we'll be able to find on that page my details, my phone number, my email, and if you could just drop me a little email, just say you attended this night before, and just give me your address. I'll draw you a little map, and I'll show you how far you are.
Oh, that'd be so nice.
Sure. I'll look for your email.
Right.
All right. Looks like you're the last person standing. So if there are any other comments, we'll call it a night. Again, thanks everybody for hanging out late, and have a good evening.